Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Stefan Livera Podcast, brought to you by Bold. For American listeners, you can buy Bitcoin over at getbold.io. Now, rejoining me on the show today with his new venture is Alejandro de la Torre. He has a new pool. He's a CEO and founder. It's called Demand, so spelled DMND. So first off, welcome back to the show, Alejandro.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for having me.
Lots of things going on, and excited to hear a little bit about what you're doing with Demand Pool. This is a new SV2, Stratum V2 pool. So for that reason, people who have been, let's say, having mining decentralization concerns, they might be somewhat alleviated here. And I think, it's interesting to see what's happening. So let's, I want to hear a bit of an overview from you, and then we'll get into other questions.
Sure. So we just launched. We've been working in stealth mode with the whole team. We hired around a small team. We got investment from TVP, which we're very proud to announce as well. That allowed us to work even faster. And now we've launched the pooled pool, the DMND. We had a solo pool up and running, which was all fun and games, but ultimately our goal has been from the get-go to start a fully Stratum V2 pool. It doesn't have a SV1 endpoint. It's only SV2.
Ah, interesting. Okay. So, I guess just winding back, just for people who are, let's say people are new, the idea just to understand the concept. So if you are an individual miner, you might have a mining machine, and why people go into a pool is because they want to smooth out the variance, basically. They want to be able to have kind of, or at least they would rather get together with other people because it's, I guess, not very feasible to be a solo miner unless you have a very large hash rate, right? And then what you're doing is, as you mentioned, Stratum V2, and you mentioned also not having an SV1 endpoint. So I guess for people who haven't heard, what is Stratum V2? Just kind of a very basic overview.
Okay, so Stratum V1 is what all other pools are using. It's a protocol for Bitcoin mining pools. It was created back in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. So it's almost 14 years old, the technology. And it shows, for example, the data that is sent from the miner to the pool is unencrypted, which is a security risk. A lot of the data is JSON, so human readable, which makes it way less efficient. And ultimately, most importantly, in my opinion, is the block generation, the creation of the blocks and the addition of the transactions are handled by the pool operator and not the miner. And that is a concern, that is a huge concern. My past is in pools. I was co-founder and vice president of BTC.com and Poolin, which were two very large pools. At one point, they were both number one. I think BTC.com was number one for 2 years in a row. Poolin vacillated between top three. And I grew over the years very concerned of this power that we had as pool operators. I started to see also how the payment method FPPS, or fee pay per share, which was actually something that we came out with in BTC.com. So I'm one of the creators of FPPS. I saw that this also caused more centralization because essentially it's two distinct things that create the centralization risk in mining pool. In mining right now, it's number one, the block generation being handled by the pool operator, and number two, the payment method FPPS. How does that happen? Well, number one, the miners, when they connect to a traditional pool, they give all the power to the pool operator, and there's nothing you can do. Technically speaking, there is no way that you can create your own block with these pools. There's no way. And number two, FPPS.
So just to explain for that, just to make sure for everyone can follow along, what you're referring to there, as you mentioned, is what's known, I guess, as block template creation, right? It's this idea that the mining, so not the individual miner, but the mining pool that they are submitting their shares to, or they point their hash rate to the pool. The pool is the one choosing which transactions go into the blocks. And so that, for the concern of decentralization, for the concern of being able to have, what people say, censorship resistance. For these concerns, there is that aspect of, I guess that's where this idea of how could you set it up in such a way where individual miners could actually create their own block as opposed to being forced to delegate that up to the mining pool?
Correct. So that boils down to the ethos of Bitcoin. Before I'm a pool operator, first and foremost, I'm a Bitcoiner, and it is my duty as a Bitcoiner, as it is, I think, for everyone else that is a Bitcoiner, to maintain the decentralization aspects of Bitcoin. And right now, the way it is, only around, let's say, 10 to 15, and to be frank, it's mostly 5 pool operators are maintaining or are creating, I should say, all the blocks in Bitcoin, which is centralization risk. It's centralized effectively. So that is something that we cannot have in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is meant to be decentralized. Its value comes from decentralization. So it's a concern not only for the ethos and for censorship resistance and all that all these very important things, but it's also a risk for our investment as Bitcoiners, right? We want Bitcoin to be a good investment, and if it's centralized, it might be, its value as a decentralized human, like, let's say a freedom money is challenged with this centralization. So that is one big concern, and that's what's trying to be 2 fixes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, as you said, so there's 2 components, as you mentioned. So the first part is the block template construction. So meaning the miner is choosing which transactions out of the mempool or mempools go into that block. And as you mentioned, that is arguably being centralized to about 5 distinct pools operating around the world, when it could be more. It could be decentralized down to the individual mining level. And then on the second component, you mentioned the payout structure. So I guess people sort of contrast, the way I've heard people contrast it is FPPS versus PPLNS, or I believe in your system it's called slice. So maybe just give us a brief overview there of FPPS versus other methods, or just slice.
Sure. So FPPS, essentially what the pool does is that it does a calculation. The question, one big question always is what that calculation is. It's a black box. We do not know how the pool operators calculate FPPS. It could be every day, every week. We don't know. We can't verify that. We can't. It's a black box. But they calculate how many blocks are going to be generated per day. That's a pretty simple calculation there. But then they also calculate the transaction fees for a historical time. And then they pay out that percentage they pay out according to how much shares you have sent to them, that calculation. And the reason why it's a centralization issue and risk for Bitcoin is that the variance is maintained solely by the mining pool operator, and what that means is that the mining pool operator has to have a very large liquidity pool, a very large war chest, so to speak. And there's only a handful of operators across the globe that can do that. And we're seeing that right now in the industry. So it's only Bitmain, Foundry, perhaps F2 pool. It's only those guys that are able that have the amount, basically the money to pay out shares when the luck or the variance goes against them. So what does that mean? That means that sometimes in variance with mining pools, the luck, we call it luck in the industry, can go against you. And what that means is that you might not find a block. But since it's FPPS, and FPPS that payout structure always has to pay out for shares, that means that the pool operator needs to pay out the shares. And that means that the pool operator must have a lot of money in their war chest to pay out these shares to the miners.
Yeah. So the simple way I'm understanding that is, if, let's say I'm a big pool operator and I'm giving FPPS, the idea might be I need to pay out my individual miners even if I haven't received anything. That's kind of the simple.
Yes.
And in order for me to do that, I need a very large balance sheet. I need to be kind of capable to weather the storm of that. And ideally, I should be big enough that I find blocks often enough that I can sort of find, that I can earn that income and not be too far in the red or too far down in terms of having to pay out to the individual miners versus what I've actually earned, right?
Yeah, correct. So what we've seen now is that a lot of pool operators they're called proxies. A lot of people are calling it now AMP pool and friends.
Like proxy pools, yeah.
Yeah, proxy pools, and they just give essentially they're a front end. They're nothing more, nothing less. They're a front end with a cool logo, a nice dashboard, but they don't have in the back end. The pool operations are handled by the very large operator like AmpPool, for example. So this is the reason is that a lot of these smaller proxy pools do not have the amount of money or balance sheet to be able to maintain to face this risk when bad luck happens. So they give all their basically when you're mining with a proxy pool, you're essentially mining with AmpPool or one of the other proxy FPPS providers, and that again creates a way. So essentially, when you see the 10, 15 pools on mempool space or any other block explorer, you're actually seeing less because a handful of those proxies with X amount of hash rate are AmpPool. The whole entire operation is handled by AmpPool. It's just these guys have a business contract, business deal with AmpPool where they pay AmpPool a certain percentage for every time there's a block found via their miners, and then these guys just take a percentage. They're middlemen essentially. So it causes even more concern, and that is more centralization, and that's what I saw. It's kind of unfortunate that I was one of the guys who created FPPS, but I'm here to destroy what I created essentially.
That's a good clippable moment there. But look, I think as you were pointing out, it's as we're kind of saying, it's this payout structure that makes it more difficult. Now, if we were to explain alternate methods, like what are some of the other ways? So you have this slice payment system. What does that mean? How would that work? Why is that better or different?
Right. So PPLNS is a much fairer system. That's number one. Why is it fair? Why? Because the pool operator essentially just pays out when a block is found. This helps the industry as a whole. Why? Because it allows for other players to enter the pool space and be able to provide their services, their pool operations to miners. Because you don't need a huge liquidity balance sheet to provide PPLNS. So it helps in that aspect. It helps decentralize the pool operations. That's number one. Number two, it adds all the fees. So essentially, let's say there's a spike in fees in the last 24 hours. With an FPPS pool, they cannot, because they do a calculation before, they cannot possibly know that there's going to be a fee spike in the future. So you don't get paid for that. So that's something that must be very clearly understood. You do not get paid if there's a fee spike or if there's more blocks found. Sometimes hash rate increases and blocks are found a little bit quicker than they're used to be. Like instead of every 10 minutes, it's every 9 minutes, which probably equals to 1 or 2 or 3 blocks that have been created extra in that difficulty epoch.
So we've been talking about how FPPS is kind of like an insurance scheme in a loose sense, that you're getting paid out anyway, but you're requiring the pool to front that money, and they kind of get to pocket the difference sometimes when there's a lot of transaction fees. Can you now explain the slice system that you're using, which, as I understand, is based on PPLNS, but you have this other component to it?
Yeah, so it's PPLNS in the sense of the block subsidy. So that's straightforward. We pay out when there's a block found, and that block is then shared. That block is then paid according to how much hash rate you sent to us. That's old school PPLNS. We haven't changed there. The JD part, which stands for job declarator, which is why we call it slice because it's a new system, takes into account the different fee structures that miners send to us in their blocks. And one thing to keep in mind is that miners are not unfairly penalized due to fee fluctuations. So what I want to make it very clear that if you mine with us and you decide to switch off, your shares are going to be paid fairly. So there's been other systems in the past, Score, for example, that penalized miners when they would switch off their hash rate to that particular pool using that particular payout structure. Now with demands and slice, we don't do that. You will get paid your fair share always. That's something that's very important to pinpoint, because a lot of miners they are part of demand response. They turn off, they turn on, whatever it is. They're still going to get paid their fair amount. That's number one. But we adjust we basically do a calculation which can be verified by the miners. So that's another, to take it back a little bit. We have a transparency system connected to this payment system. So a miner is able to actually verify that the share that they've received is being paid out according to the calculation in the pool. So they can verify and challenge us that we're paying them correctly. That's number one. And they don't have to just, and it can be a share that they sent or a share that anyone else sent. So they can verify that everyone is getting paid correctly. So that's one very important thing. And then we subdivide the PPLNS lookback window, ensuring fairness in transaction fee distribution. Instead of all the shares competing in a single large window, we slice the groups into smaller time-based segments, lookback window in other words, and we benchmark that slice against the highest revenue generating share. That's how it works. And essentially it makes the system, it allows for miners who are adding more transaction fees to get paid according to that, or miners who are putting in less transactions into the block to get paid less. So if you send us less transactions, you're going to get paid less, and everyone else is also going to be paid a slight disadvantage there. However, if a miner adds transactions, the miners in our pool will get paid more. So it basically it equals out after a long enough period. It equals out to a normal payout.
I see. Yeah. And I guess you could think of it like you are also not paying for the quote unquote insurance of FPPS. So I guess that's one other aspect that would be maybe a benefit for people doing, this kind of system.
Right. So this whole entire FPPS model of insurance is centralizing, as I said, and it creates a huge, let's say, balance sheet risk. We don't have that. It's fair. You'll get paid more, and you'll have the ability to verify that all your shares are being paid correctly. So it's a win-win-win.
So there's less trust me, bro, there. Okay, so I think the other big question listeners might have is if they're familiar with the mining industry, what's the difference between Demand Pool and, let's say, Braiins, who also talk about Stratum V2, and also Ocean, who have Datum. So can you explain the difference?
Great question. So I get this question essentially daily, and it's a good question. So Stratum V2, in my humble opinion, is primarily the ability to build your own blocks. Without that, I don't think it's Stratum V2, but okay. To be fair to Braiins, they do have Stratum V2 features in their pool. Like I think it's the efficiency and the binary data, which are Stratum V2 features. So you could say that they have a Stratum V2 pool, but the whole entire point of Stratum V2 is to allow miners to build their own blocks. So we kind of call ourselves the first fully transparent SV2 pool, because we're the ones who actually do encompass the whole entire features of SV2.
I see.
Datum is a also a block template creation technology and protocol. However, their specifications are not yet live. They said they're going to do it. It's been months. I just want to basically, it's good. It's a net positive for the industry to have more technology out there that allows for block template creation by miners. That's our goal. We like that. So Ocean is good in our books. But I think in terms of the technology, Stratum V2 has been tested, has been worked on for 3 years, has many miners many developers working. It's a open source tech, and it's well specified and documented. So I would just kind of my say there is that Stratum V2 is the more advanced technology in that sense.
Back to the show in a moment. This show brought to you by CoinKite.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices, such as the Coldcard Mark IV and the new Coldcard Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, you have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases. You can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, if you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your cold card. This episode brought to you by Galloy. They are building banking software for the Bitcoin age. So if you are with a bank, a fintech, or a startup looking to offer some kind of Bitcoin product, whether that is a Bitcoin collateralized loan, deposit accounts, or payments, Galloy can help you. Their latest product is called Lana. It is a loans management platform, and you can use this to come to market quickly and offer a loans or Bitcoin collateralized lending product for your customers. Now, Galloy have a lot of experience in the space. They started with Blink Wallet in 2020, and they've since grown this to become a community favorite over time. And so they have a lot of experience making things work in a secure, reliable, and scalable way. So if you need assistance coming to market quickly with a Bitcoin banking product, such as lending or deposits or payments, talk to the team at Galloy. You can email them. The email is biz@galloy.io, or go to the website galloy.io. And now, back to the show. Okay, understood. And it is fair to point out network effects advantages there, right? So I think that's probably one fair point of difference there. Now, obviously, I'm not a technical expert, but I'm asking you, what is when I was reading and talking to people about Stratum V2, I remember some of the Stratum developers talking about things like a translation proxy to sort of help old miners and this kind of thing, where maybe if that so that those miners didn't have to have SV2, but the pool could, and things like that. How does that work in with you, or is it just more like every miner in your pool just is running their own node and that's it?
Good question. It's two distinct things. The Bitcoin node is when you want to create. Of course, by the way, it's optional. You don't need to create your own block with us. You can accept our block template and just run with that if you prefer. But if you want to create your own block, which is what we want you to do, you have to run a Bitcoin node. But that actually is a benefit for the miner, because it's no longer necessary for the miner to send, or I should say, it's no longer necessary for the pool to send a new job to the miner. Or if the block is found by that miner who's creating their own blocks, they communicate directly to the Bitcoin node in their operation. And that saves them a lot of data, a lot of potential stale shares, etc. So this is actually a very strong feature of ours. because the miner is communicating straight to Bitcoin D, bypassing the necessity to send information to us, and then us as pool operators sending it to Bitcoin D. That is a very strong feature of ours. And then there's the proxy, which is a distinct thing, and that proxy is a translator. And essentially, what that does is that it translates SV1 shares to SV2. And this proxy must be used on your operations in order for you to mine with demand. We are adding a bunch of cool features there. One of them is, for example, it's kind of a miner management software at the end of the day, and it's very seamless. It's it's the reality. In the future, Stratum V2 ready miners won't need to run that proxy.
Translation proxy, because they would just directly, right. And I guess this is because this is a relatively new, even though it's been out for a few years and people have been talking about it for years. Yeah. I guess you still want software support. You ideally, in the ideal world, you want hardware that natively kind of supports it. And I guess where are we at today with, the current, like the physical mining machines? Yeah. Where are they on Stratum V2 support nowadays?
Well, it's a kind of a chicken and egg problem, because if there's no Stratum V2 pools, the mining manufacturers don't see a necessity to create a Stratum V2 miner. So it's a kind of a long-term play, in my opinion. I think as when demand starts growing, and I think a lot of these mining manufacturers will see that there is a necessity for them to create a native SV2 machine, then we'll start seeing it. Right now, there's no machines that are SV2 native, so we're still in the early days.
Right, and I presume, is that also part, or is that the reason why you still need this translation proxy as well?
Yes, you need this translation proxy to translate the messages from an SV1 machine to an SV2 message.
Pool, gotcha. Or into a message that goes to the pool, which is you guys demand. Yeah. Correct. Okay, understood. I think. Yeah. Okay, and so then one thing around, people might be thinking, well, do you need a certain level of hash rate to be viable? Like, what's the thought there? And I presume, obviously, on your side, you must be doing a lot of business development and obviously trying to get miners to sign up and point their hash rate to you. But can you just explain a bit of your thoughts there on the viability question?
Yes. So right now, with our pool demand, we've opened up the application selection for mostly large miners. We're coordinating the hash rate as we speak to go live. We have lots of interest, thankfully, and we're always looking for more miners. So right now our strategy is to focus mostly on larger operations. This will allow us to get to a certain threshold, because with PPLNS you need to hit a certain threshold to be hitting a block per day. That will allow for constant payouts to the miners. So that's like a misconception that a lot of the industry has, is that PPLNS does not have constant payouts. That's incorrect. If there is enough hash rate to be hitting 1 or 2 blocks per day, then you're looking at a constant payout per day. I think it's something around 0.005% of the time you will not get a block that day. So it's very low. And that increases significantly by more hash rate you have, or in other words, more blocks you're being found per day. So this whole entire, there's this misconception in the industry that PPLNS does not pay out constantly. That's incorrect. That's only if you don't have enough hash rate. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to hit that threshold, that number.
That minimum threshold, let's say.
Yes.
Right. And so let's say if there's 6 blocks an hour, 24 hours in a day, that's 144 blocks. So I guess, does that mean, in other words, you need 1 over 144 as a percent of the network to kind of meet that minimum viable threshold, which, I don't know, I can't do maths on the podcast, but let's say 0.8, 0.7% of a hash rate, something like that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Something like that. So as long as you can get above that threshold, then it's sort of like, okay, now we're starting to be viable and really pay out every day, and therefore the customers, or the miners in this case, are going to be happier with that because they're getting at least one payout a day.
Yeah,
That's the idea.
yeah. And even if it's one block every 2 days, it's still pretty good. But yeah, our aim is to hit one block per day at the very least.
Excellent. Okay. And so I guess, do you have any idea, or I know, and I'm sure you probably saw this as well, Bob Burnett did like a study from barefoot mining, and he sort of showed, he was saying, look how much more we're getting by, now he's obviously at Ocean. I believe he's chairman of the board or on the board at Ocean, but he was trying to show the difference between kind of the FPPS and PPLNS worlds. I'm curious if you have any reactions on that. I guess, how much is the insurance costing? Is the FPPS insurance policy costing miners?
Yes, that's the whole thing too. We can't. It's very difficult for us to quantify that number. It's because we don't know what the calculation is for these FPPS pools. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that miners that this industry, which is meant to be open and fair and free, is being controlled by operators and God knows where, creating calculations that we do not know. We don't know what's going on, so we can't say. So yes, it's very difficult for miners to actually realize, hey, we're getting paid a lot less. That report by Bob Burnett is a very good one, and it's a good step forward in showing that PPLNS is basically a better system for payouts for miners. However, you have to always keep in the back of the head that Bob Burnett works or is chairman of Ocean, so there's some, let's say, bias involved, of course. But again, it's a good step forward. It illuminates this issue very clearly. That's very good. So we're also working on a few benchmarking tools too. At Demands, we've been working with Hash Labs to benchmark this. And let's see how it goes out. Ultimately, we think that Stratum V2 and PPLNS and all these things are not, let's just say, you're not gonna see a 10% increase in profit, but you're gonna see like perhaps 1%, 1.5, 0.5. And if you add it all up, you add up how Slice integrates all the transaction fees, all the blocks. If you add up that Stratum V2 creates less stale shares, your Bitcoin node is communicating directly with Bitcoin D. All these things add up, and they get to a percentage that is higher than the other pools. That's the bet. That's the whole reason why I'm here.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, yeah, and as you've also mentioned, Stratum V2 has the encryption as well. So that's another thing I've heard of, that hash rate hijacking, basically a hacker hijacking your hash rate and pointing it to some other pool, and the mining machine owners in those cases, sometimes they didn't even know. And this is not a theoretical risk, it has happened. So that's another thing that Stratum V2 actually solves that issue.
Yeah. We actually saw it's sort of a different attack, but this attack would have been, let's say, way harder to pull off. We saw DNS poisoning many years ago in China when I was working at Pulin. The Chinese telecom company, which works, of course, in conjunction with the government, they were, watching the network, and they were able to, since the data is unencrypted from the miner to the pool, they were able to very easily find out which data is coming from the miner and connecting to the pool, and they just basically shut that off. So from one day, I woke up in the morning, and all of our pool, basically all of our miners were offline to the pool. And this could have been this would have been way harder to do if the data was encrypted. So it still can be done, but it's
just a little bit harder. Yeah.
No,
gotcha.
much harder. So
much harder. Yeah.
That's one example. And of hash rate hijacking, the thing is that these guys who are hijacking hash rate are very good at hijacking hash rate, and you don't see it. So they take a small percentage, they skim off the top, and you don't notice it. So these things are a concern for miners. Ultimately, our goal is to create a safe pool, not only giving more money to the miners, but it being safe, and your hash rate is yours. It should be yours.
Yeah. Obvious question. What are the fees you're going to charge to the miners?
Question.
Yeah.
Right now we have a 0% fee, so that's so straightforward.
Intro offer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an intro offer for 2 months, and we're also doing a founding miner deal, which is basically a very competitive fee, lower than the rest. Afterwards, we're still working on what the fee should be. It's probably going to be industry standard, but again, we're looking to grow, so we're open to negotiating the fees.
Excellent. From your perspective, what is required to be a good pool?
That's a good question. Well, look, I'll take it. That's a good question. Over the years, people have, everyone's always told me, oh, when I started telling industry veterans essentially that I wanted to create my own pool, everyone thought I was crazy. Because they're like, why would you want to start a new pool? It's basically a front end nowadays with just connection with a business deal with Ampool. Like that's it. You can have a nice front end. You can have some very strong business developers, some good marketing, but that's it. That's kind of a very stale business. In other words, they were saying. But I thought that was incorrect. I thought, look, man, there's Stratum V2. Stratum V2 brings incremental positive changes, little bit of percentage here, bit of percentage there. I think that is sufficient enough to create more revenue to the miner, which is paramount. That is paramount. Our mission with demand is to give more, maximize revenue and decentralize Bitcoin. So a good pool is a safe pool. We're very, very careful with everything. That's why we're doing lots of testing. That's why we're taking things in phases. That's why we decided to do a sort of a private launch with founding miners instead of opening the doors to everyone, because we're very careful. We want to take things slowly but surely. Every step we take has to be a very sure step. We don't want to mess up. So we're taking that very seriously, and that's like a pillar of any good pool. It's to have a safe and safe pool. And there's low hanging fruit: better UI, better UX, cool marketing, strong business development. Those are all operational efficiency gains. But I think what we bring, it changes the game sufficiently. We have created a sufficient enough change for it to be a viable alternative to miners. And that's what makes a good pool, allowing for miners not only to create blocks and all the good stuff that Stratum V2 brings, but having all these set of features that sets us apart. That's what creates good pool.
Yeah, I see. And I presume in order to make it work now, you're a industry veteran here. You've been in over 10 years now in the mining, deep in the mining world, highly connected. You've been, in the room at many of these important conversations. I guess other things that, as I understand, matter for a mining pool, things like, having good connectivity around the world, low latency, kind of high uptime, all of these things. I presume for you, that's like you've already checked those boxes. You don't even have to think too hard about that, or what?
No, well, yeah, that's actually a really good question, and that's one of the cool features of SV2, because if the miner is actually building their own block, the let's say the distance between the miner and us, the manned operator, or our Bitcoin pool node, is no longer necessary. In other words, the latency that Stratum V1 pools have to, it's a big problem. I get this a lot. A lot of big miners ask me, hey, can you set up a pool proxy near our mining? Like, let's say you're in Africa somewhere and they want a pool node in South Africa, Johannesburg, because they know that the further the pool node is from their operation, the harder it is to, or the more stale shares they will get. But that's no longer an issue with Stratum V2, because if they're communicating, when they're building their own blocks, they're communicating straight to their Bitcoin node. And that solves that issue. That is a huge, huge improvement in Bitcoin mining. So, it's made it's made it a lot easier for us, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I've seen things like the what's it called, SRI, Stratum Reference Implementation. So can you maybe explain a little bit about SRI contrasted with what you are doing specifically on your implementation for demand?
Yeah, cool. Good question. So, our co-founder was the lead developer at SRI, so the open source Stratum V2, Stratum Reference Implementation. He joined. We started the man together, so he's essentially the best guy to build Stratum V2. Since he built the open source tech, and basically Stratum Reference Implementation and demand code is. One of them is, let's say, the foundation. SRI is the foundation to build a pool. Demand is in production, right? That's the difference. It takes a very concentrated and hard effort to get, code that is, let's say, foundational for it. Moving that to production is a whole different ball game, let's say. And we've added a whole bunch of features. That's another important thing I want to add. We added the new payment system, of course, Slice. We've also reworked the mempool. Our mempool is a cluster mempool, which again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that these small percentage gains in every single the whole entire stack of demand has been looked into and reworked. So this pool is, in my opinion, the most advanced pool in the industry, because even the mempool we've reworked. And the cluster mempool essentially is a better algorithm than normal mempools. And it, to not get too technical, it basically allows for better transaction fees to be included in the block. So it creates a small percentage gain from the old mempool. And that's something we have integrated, and our pool is fully using a cluster mempool. So the difference between SRI and demand is that we've reworked a lot of the other features that SRI does not look into. Like SRI does not look into the mempool, because the mempool is a Bitcoin core thing, but we have looked into it. We've reworked it. We've created a more efficient mempool. So it's the addition of other features to SRI which creates the difference.
Yeah, I see. A common point I've seen people talk about is people say things like, well, the market has decided people want FPPS for whatever reason. Right? That's I'm sure you've heard that probably 1,000 times as well. I presume they're saying a lot of the miners out there, they really want that insurance, and that they are cognizant of this and they're willing to pay the price. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think it's actually, that they don't know, or that they find it too difficult? Like, I guess let me put the question to you this way. Why is it that so many miners have chosen FPPS rather than Stratum V2?
Well, Stratum V2 is new. That's number one. So it's now ready. So the reason why we haven't seen Stratum V2 pools in the wild, so to speak, is because Stratum V2 technology wasn't ready yet. So now it's ready. So that's number one. FPPS is miners don't know. That's number one. I've released information about FPPS for PPLNS recently, and I got a lot of feedback from miners telling me, "Hey, thank you for telling me this, because I did not know that what was going on behind. I just thought, hey, I connect my miner, I get paid. That's it. But actually, there's a whole entire thing going on behind there that I did not recognize." So yes, a lot of that has to do with not being known. This information not being known. And a very important thing I'd like to add here is that, as Bitcoiners, everyone, we're all hoping, and I'm positive about it, that in the future there's going to be more transaction fees. That's the whole premise of Bitcoin mining, essentially, that eventually the block subsidy will stop and transaction fees will pay for the mining in the industry, the security of Bitcoin. So we have to, the PPLNS actually is able to reward miners for this for these transaction fees that will continue to come in. So it is, I think FPPS is going to be a payment system that will be dead in the future. It will not, no one will be FPPS in the future. No one. Because once transaction fees continue to play a more important role in Bitcoin mining, which already is playing a more important role, we will see that miners will say, hey, what's going on? Well, I'm not getting paid all these transaction fees. I'm only getting paid a small amount of that. So we will see that change.
The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 of 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Coldcard hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. And now, back to the show. Yeah, good point around the shift over time that most people, let's say, hypothesize that subsidies are going to come down, fees are going to go up, and then they'll be coming back to the trust me bro point that we were saying earlier. Now you're having to trust, let's say if you're an individual miner, you're trusting for more and more of your actual payout from the mining pool. So it's an interesting point that over time, maybe FPPS is on the down.
It will. It is. You'll see.
Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I think those are kind of the key questions I had on the demand pool side. But let's just talk, broadly a bit about mining.
Sure.
Any broad updates where you think mining has come from, where it's going, anything that is really top of your mind there?
Well, I'm very positive of the what's going on in Africa. I see the gridless guys; they're
Like
pushing very
gridless and
hard.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing a very good job there. I've spoken to a handful of other operators doing a similar thing, and they're all working more or less together. Gamma. So I think that's one of the coolest things in Bitcoin mining at the moment. The whole entire African mining movement, let's say. That's very positive because they're helping the community, right? They're otherwise buying electricity that would be wasted, which is then lowering the cost of the villagers in that particular area, which allows the villagers to turn on their electricity, turn on their fridge, whatever it is, to live a normal life. So it's a net positive, and I really like to see mining and being used for the general good. So that's a huge win. In terms of the large operators in North America, there's a lot of let's just say miners are what's the word, buying other miners. What's the word?
So they're fighting other miners?
No, there's a lot of what's the word when you buy a bunch of miners and you
Acquire. Yeah.
yeah, you're
And some of
acquired.
them are like hostile acquisitions and whatever. Yeah, or take
So a
mergers
lot
and
of
acquisitions. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of acquisitions nowadays going on in the large operators. A lot of large operators becoming even larger. That's something that I had envisioned already in the past, and we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that plays out. I think when you get super big, it might cause essentially you have a crosshair on your back because you're very large, and if you're very large in a particular region of the world, it might cause political concerns. So the game for large operators is very different than what mid to small operators play. And those guys have to deal with politics and whatnot. So we'll continue to monitor that. You know, I think a lot of these large operators also are looking for pools that are compliant and whatnot. So that's also an interesting play. We will see more pools that are being SOC2 type 2 compliant. You know, providing all the things that these big operators need in order to join them. And there's also the movement of the small miners. So you're seeing a growth not only in the large operators but also in small operators. The bid-axe movement is incredible. There's been blocks being hit by these guys like almost on a weekly basis, so to speak.
Yeah, it's cool to see.
It's really cool to see. And I think I actually got 4 bid-axes in my office running right now.
Nice.
Yeah, that have been actually gifted to me by various like power mining and whatnot, and OG BTC or Marshall. So yeah, so I got my hash rate pointed at my pool. Let's see if I hit a block. If I hit a block, I'll definitely buy you a beer.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it's important that we you know, bring back a little bit of the power back to the home miners. And I think we're going to see a lot of more. There's a lot of interest there, a lot of tinkerers right now, but I think it's going to become a little bit more general. And we might see, I think we're going to see even more sort of home mining equipment being made. And we also have new manufacturers coming online. We got BitDeer coming out with their Seal miner, which is very exciting. I think those guys are going to hit it off the park. They've done it before. The CEO was co-founder of Bitmain, so I trust he can do it again. And we're also seeing manufacturers in the US like Block coming out with their chip, their innovative kind of design, and we'll, you know, it's ultimately again a net positive for the industry. If there's more manufacturers in the industry, you know, just having a handful is not enough. We have to. I am a pool operator and I'm focused on the pool side of things. I can't. The mining manufacturer game is a whole very expensive game. I don't have that type of money, but it's good. It's good. We hopefully once the pool industry is decentralized sufficiently, we can shift our focus to the mining manufacturer and trying to decentralize or create a more fairer system for us as Bitcoiners. And we're starting to see the beginning of that. So that's very, very good. I'm very positive with mining. I think in the future we're also going to see lots of, let's say, more, not lots, but more countries trying to mine Bitcoin, or at least being positive with Bitcoin in their country. We do already see like Bhutan mining Bitcoin, El Salvador, I believe. So I think
Ethiopia, a few others, yeah.
Ethiopia,
UAE,
UAE. So
Oman,
there's a lot of,
yeah.
right. There's a lot of players already in the game, and I'm certain there's other countries out there who are mining Bitcoin who are just not saying anything. And I think that will continue. And this is good for us as pool operators. If there's more hash rate coming online, it's great for us.
Excellent. Any other, I guess, trends you're seeing? Like one I've heard recently is that there's been a somewhat of a shift towards liquid cooling as opposed to air cooling. Any comments on that aspect of it, or?
Yeah. Liquid cooling and water hydro cooling your miners allows you to run them way hotter or run them harder, because it solves a lot of the issues that you face with heat when you're doing air cooled miners. But it also presents a whole entire different set of problems. You have to have clean water if you're trying hydro. A lot of this, if you're doing liquid cooled, which is petroleum based liquids, those things can be, let's say, not very healthy for human beings. So you have to look into like sucking out some of that air from your facilities. Yes, you can run your miner harder, but then you have to consider fresh water. You have to consider safety. You have to consider it's much more expensive. So it's trade-offs. It's a trade-off. I think air-cooled mining will not go away, in my opinion. I think it's going to continue, especially in areas where, let's say in the, I don't know what the term, global south. I think mining will continue to be air-cooled, and these machines are created with that in mind. Most of them. So, yeah, I think liquid and hydro is useful for certain places and with miners that have the ability to provide that.
Yeah. One other question around censorship, because that's, I guess, part of Stratum V2. The idea is to keep it decentralized. I know there are some individuals out there who are doing like monitoring. So as an example, there's a pseudonymous developer 0xB10C. I think he's doing some interesting things to sort of compare like the blocks and sort of see were any transactions censored and things like that. So do you see it like, SV2, as SV2 adoption happens, it sort of takes away that censorship? What do you think?
That's a good question. Number one, I'm a huge fan of 0x, probably his biggest fan. Read all his stuff religiously. The censorship issue, as a pool operator, like if there's 10 pool operators around the globe or 15, and ultimately it's way less because of what I said earlier, the proxies, it makes it a lot easier for a government to say, knock on the door and say, hey, we don't want this to go through. But if all the miners are the ones creating the blocks, then it makes it much more difficult for that to happen. So Stratum V2 is not a panacea. It's not going to fix all the issues. That's not what I'm saying. There's still of course more improvements to be had, more aspects that could be fixed and whatnot. But it makes it better, and that's what I want to do. I mean, that's the technology we have, and if it's a step forward in the right direction, then that's what that's what I want. So that's why I've done it, and that's why we're here pushing this Stratum V2 protocol forward. Ultimately, in the future, when there's more Stratum V2 pools, if a Stratum V2 pool decides to say, hey, we're not accepting this block, the miner is able to then send their block templates to the other Stratum V2 pool. That would be the future. That is the future we're envisioning, where let's say some Stratum V2 pool, not us, but some other Stratum V2 pool decides to censor. Well, that miner can just easily switch the block template generation and send those shares to another pool that accepts that. So it gives it it's a step harder for governments or any regulatory body to censor. So that's good. That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I guess summarizing, we've talked about a lot of different things, but I guess for me the key takeaways are these 2 points, right? It's Stratum V2 allowing block template creation at the miner level, not just at the mining pool level, and then the payout system being PPLNS based or slice in your version of that, as opposed to FPPS, and summing together some of the efficiencies and other components of it. Does that mean miners can earn more? Maybe they'll be interested. And I think most people are interested to see some Stratum V2 adoption. So hoping for the best here. So before we let you go, any final closing comment, and where can people find you online?
For sure. So the closing comment here is that we're focused on maximizing revenue for you as a miner while decentralizing Bitcoin. So you're doing a net good for the industry by mining with us. You can find me on Twitter, BitEntrepreneur, or you can follow our pool at demand_pool.
Great. And website is dmnd.work. Okay. So listeners are in the show notes. The links are in the show notes. And Alejandro, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you.